All right, hi guys. I know a lot of my friends have expressed interest in how I make bread, so I'm going to try to do as best I can a little tutorial video. I'm going to pre-measure the ingredients. I use a scale as opposed to measuring cups because it's a more accurate way of measuring and your bread's going to come out better. Right now I have my yeast. There's about 3 grams of yeast in here, and I'm just going to put it in the water before I measure out my other ingredients.
Is there something with the temperature of the water?
Yeah, the water is, because it's cold in here because our furnace broke, normally I would do about 80 to 85 degrees. Right now I'm using about 100 degrees water because my flour is a lot more cold right now and it's cooler in here. You don't want to go above 110 for water. So I usually measure out the temperature. So I just put the yeast in there. I'm going to let that sit while I measure out the other ingredients. Okay, so I already did my yeast. That was 3 grams. So now I'm going to do the flour. And for the flour, I'm going to measure out 500 grams of flour. All-purpose flour I have. It's kind of hard to get right now, but if you can get it. I use King Arthur flour. I like it. It has more of a higher protein content, which is going to make your bread a little better. A lot of people use bread flour. I haven't, but any all-purpose flour will work. So I'm just measuring it out. Also, with the flour, when you put it, it's easier to put it in a bucket like this. And when you do just kind of stir it around, it'll lighten the flour so it's not all packed down. But this is where a scale comes in a lot better than measuring cups because I don't even know what this would equal in measuring cups, honestly.
And it would depend if it's packed or not packed.
It would depend, yeah. It would depend if it's packed or not packed. And I don't know. I actually hate using measuring cups now. I thought this would be such a pain in the butt, but this is so much easier. You just do it till you get to 500 grams, about, on the scale. And they're not super expensive. Yeah, I put in a little too much, so I can just take out some of that. So that's about 500 grams right there. And then now I'm going to measure, and I zero it. Now I'm going to measure my salt. So salt, water, yeast, and flour is the basic ingredients for bread. Real simple. And I'm using the Kirkland Costco fine sea salt. Just tastes better, but you can use any salt. And I'm using 10 grams of salt for this. And salt weighs a lot, so it doesn't take a lot to get it to 10 grams. All right. Yeah, salt's really doesn't take much at all, so it kind of take a little bit out at a time. All right, close enough. What I do is I usually put my salt right in the flour and mix it in because salt will hinder the yeast from growing, but I mean it's also gonna, it's a very necessary ingredient. It doesn't matter, you don't have to do that, but I do it. Either way, your bread will rise.
What you don't want to do is pour the salt in one big clump with the yeast on.
Yeah, so you want to, if you're going to do it the other way, just make sure you... Now, a lot of people do this part with the yeast because they want to make sure their yeast is still active. Usually let it sit for 10 minutes. It's not even completely necessary, honestly, with the kind of... I use instant yeast. I'm really not sure the difference between them. I know you can use any of them. I know yeast right now is really hard to come by, so whatever you happen to find in the grocery store is okay. It should all work. And there again, If you want to do this, measure the temperature of the water, put the yeast in, let it sit for 5 to 10 minutes, or like me, you can just let it sit for a couple minutes. It doesn't matter. It's gonna work. I know my yeast is gonna work. I'm gonna turn the sink on. Well, so I'm gonna mix this by hands. I have washed my hands. I did it all to, they're fine. Just put that in like that. And I'm gonna mix it. I'm gonna turn the water on because I'm gonna need it to keep my hands from sticking. I'll show you. You want to make sure you get all the flour incorporated, especially the bottom part and the sides. You're gonna probably, I put 375 grams of water at 100 degrees about in here because like I said, it's cold in my house. I don't normally go that high in temperature, but it's sticky. The dough is sticky. It's sticking to my hands, but I'm not going to add water to it just yet because I really want to incorporate the dough into the flour or into the water. I just want to make sure I get the sides and underneath. You don't want dry spots. And actually, that seems to be enough water, but it's coming together pretty nice. It is sticking to my hands. So what I do is I'll put it under the faucet and I'll just let it rinse a little bit. I'll go in back with my hands like this, incorporate that, and it's gonna be a lot less sticky on your hands. Just make sure you got underneath and the sides. See that? A lot less sticky. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let that sit for 20 minutes and I'll come back and I will show you what to do. What this basically does is it allows the water to really absorb into the flour. And then I will do a couple of folds. This is not no knead bread. It was no knead bread at one point, but I've added knead into it in a very small, easy way. I'll show you that in 20 minutes, so I will see you soon. All right, so it's been 20 minutes and we're gonna do some letter folds on the dough, which is essentially a form of kneading. That's gonna develop the gluten in the dough so that way when you bake it, it will hold together a lot better than no knead dough will. So before I do that, I'm gonna wet I already washed my hands, but I'm gonna wet them so there again, the dough doesn't stick to them. And I don't want them to be too wet because I don't want to add too much more moisture into the dough, but there's my dough. All right, so we're going to take it like this and we're going to do what we call letter fold. Put it over like that. And we just keep going around and doing that till we feel like the dough has some strength to it. I'm going to do it a little bit more because I actually like it to be quite tight. But the recipe recommends maybe doing it 3-4 times around. I don't think that's enough personally, so I'm just going to do it till I feel that it's ready. Now, a lot of time when you're working with the dough, recipes are good. They're there to guide you. But for dough, you can't go exactly by recipe because external conditions, what's the temperature in your house? What is the weather like outside? How hot is your dough? What temperature water did you use? All that is going to affect the dough and it's different every day. So you really need to know exactly what you're looking for when the dough is ready.
And what is that?
I don't know. I can explain it to you as it comes. Right now I'll show you. You can see how this is getting tighter. You can see how it's forming a nice little ball right there. And I'm just going to keep doing that for a few, like another maybe 30 seconds to a minute. So this is kind of a form of kneading in a way. Honestly, guys, I really don't even know how to knead dough the regular way. And every time I try, it's no good. It's just no good for me. I get way too frustrated. And I find doing it in my bucket keeps things nice and clean. It keeps it neat. It's not all over my table. It's not sticking to my kitchen. It just makes for a happier me. And this works just fine. Because it basically, if you put this in your KitchenAid thing, it's going to look kind of like doing this anyway. when you need it. So I think this is pretty good. I think that's, yeah. Okay. So once that's done, I'm using a bucket. A lot of people don't have these. Any kind of glass bowl, non-reactive bowl will work. You want to cover it. I do not cover it all the way. I usually like to leave a little bit of air through it. And I probably read why I do that, but I don't remember. Well, now I wanted to explain a couple more things before I let this rise. So it's been about 10 minutes probably since the phone call. As you can see, this is pretty much where the dough was after it expanded a little bit more. But a lot of dough recipes will say when it rises double in size, it's done. You cannot listen to that, because if you look at this, rising double in size would pretty much mean it's right there, okay? Every time I do this, my dough gets to at least about here. And as you can tell, that's way bigger than double in size. There's specific things you want to look for before you know the dough is done. I'm going to come back and I'm going to say probably about 6 hours, but I don't know. It's a little cooler in here today, so it may be longer. You, there again, can't go by the recipe, because the recipe will tell me that this takes about 8 hours before the dough is completely risen. But because of temperatures where the author, who lives in California, wrote this, and where we live here in Massachusetts, it factors in differently. So I will show you when we come back exactly what you want to look for in your dough. So you can't go by time. So if you wanted, if the recipe says 8 hours and you wanted to leave it for 8 hours and go out to work or go do whatever you're going to do and come back, that could be too long and you could have ruined your dough by then. Or it may not be long enough, but if you don't know what to look for and then you try to make the dough, it's going to come out dense and just not very good. So forget all times. If you're going to make the recipe, just, you know, we all have seemingly a lot more time now, so this is a good time to experiment with it. And it is a process, there is a learning curve, but I will show you exactly what to look for. But anyway, so this is how it's rising. Probably be back in about 6 hours or so. All right, everyone, we're back. So it is 6 o'clock at night, and we started around 11, so that's 7 hours about. Normally, this recipe calls for 8 hours. Normally, I get it in 6, but because it was cooler in here today, it took me 7. You can see, this is where it rose to, and you can see that it's kind of flat. This is how I know my dough is done and ready to be for the final proof. It's kind of flat in here. You can see that, and you can see it's very bubbly. You can see the bubbles and all that in there like that. So when it's kind of like that, that's when you can tell that your dough is ready to go in the basket over here for the final proof. If it's doming up a lot like that, which I meant to show you but forgot to do, sorry, then it's not done yet. It's still, when it's more flatlined like that, it is ready to be finally proofed. So I already floured my basket. I floured my board. I like to use a separate board for this, but the counter is fine. And we're just going to take the dough out of the bucket. And it's going to be sticky. And that's okay. We'll work with it. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to do some folds like we did at the beginning part of this video. Just kind of fold it over like that. There again, it's kind of sticky, but it's okay. And I have what they call a bench knife. Where you can, if you want to, you can shape your dough a little bit more. Just by moving it around. It is still kind of sticky. But That's okay. All right. So we're going to put it in the basket. I'm going to put it...
What kind of basket is that?
I don't know. I don't know the technical name for it. Banton basket, I believe. I don't know. But whatever. You can get them on Amazon. King Arthur Flour is also another good resource to get those. Or you can just use a regular basket. A lot of people put a cloth in their basket. Or whatever you have. If you have a bowl. A lot of people put a cloth in their basket and they can use it that way. I like the design that it makes on my dough. All right. So once it's in there, just sprinkle a little tiny bit of flour on it. And we're gonna let that rise probably an hour to 2 hours. It can go up to. I will show you what it looks like when it's done. It's going to be very buoyant. It's going to be when you poke it, it's not, see how when I poke it there, it comes right back up, doesn't stay down. So when you poke your bread, if it does that, it's not done yet. This is going to rise again, probably double its size, maybe a little bit more. But I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to cover this with a dish towel that I have specifically for this. And let it rise. In about a half hour, I've noticed for myself, for our house, I usually give it about a half hour, then I'm going to turn the stove on to 475 and let it heat for the rest of the way. That might mean your stove is on empty for an hour, up to a couple hours I've had it go. But it's really important that you have a really hot stove for this, so you don't want to just let it preheat and then throw it in there. Also, I let it preheat with an empty Dutch oven, which is in the sink over there, when I turn it on. And then that way I'll take out the empty Dutch oven when I throw the dough in, and that's what's gonna cause it to steam. The steam is gonna be trapped inside there, and it's gonna cause the bread to really rise and have that nice crust. I'll show you all that. I will see you in a little bit. All right, everybody, it's time to bake the bread. So this is what it looks like after it has risen in the proofing basket, which I don't know the technical name for. You can see it's risen a lot more. It kind of jiggles around a little bit. When you poke it, you can see that the hole just kind of stays in there. It doesn't rise really back up. So this is ready to go. I use parchment paper. It's just so much easier to transfer the bread once I put it on there into the oven. So I'm going to do that. Oh, also I use a kind of ghetto, but I use a box cutter, which is specific to this purpose, has not been used for anything but cooking, so it's perfectly fine to score the bread as well. All right, so just going to cut the parchment paper down to size a little bit so that way it doesn't misshape the bread while cooking, because it will do that a little bit. So just give me a second. Kind of just cut it. All right, I'm going to take out the Dutch oven. It's a very hot pot, so you want to make sure not to touch it at 475 degrees. It's been in the oven for probably a little over an hour now, just warming up. And you want to do this process really pretty quickly. So I'm just going to score it, which is just basically cutting into it. I'm making a cross shape so that way it expands, and it's going to expand in a nice round way. It's going to If you don't have to score it. If you don't score it, the bread's just going to break whichever way it wants, which is fine as well. I like it this way, though. All right, we're going to put it in the pot pretty quickly here without touching the pot. All right. Make sure we put our oven mitts on before touching this. Put it back in the oven. Close it, and I'm going to bake this for about 25 minutes with the cover on. After 25 minutes, I'm going to remove the cover and let it bake for another 15 to 20 minutes. Usually I do 15 minutes just because I like it a little less dark, the crust. All right, I'll see you in about 25 minutes. All right, everyone, it is almost time for the big reveal. Now, we still have 15 minutes of cooking after this is done, but this is my absolute favorite part. Can you smell that wonderful bread cooking? If not, you will when you decide to cook. All right, so we're going to take the cover off the Dutch oven, and it's going to be, this is the best part because you get to see what your dough looks like and how it formed, and we can go 25 seconds early. I think that will be okay. All right. Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. That is the most satisfying thing to open that. So now we're going to put another 15 minutes on the clock. Usually people do 15 to 20 minutes. A lot of people in the bread world really like a very dark crust. I don't know, it's very coveted. And I was doing that for a while, but I just kind of like it a little bit lighter. It's still done inside, it's still cooked. I just think it tastes a little bit better. And for all of you I've made bread for, I haven't heard any complaints, so it must be working pretty well. All right, talk to you in 15 minutes.
You're alive.
All right, it's done. So we're going to take it out now. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? Put that up there. All right. Take it out of the pot. Got a little scooper thing. Just comes right out. And right onto my cooling rack. You don't want to leave it in the pot because it will turn soggy. But that's pretty much the bread. That one came out really quite nice. Got a nice rise. I like to, you hear a hollow sound. It's pretty much you can tell that it's done. If you have an terminal with a monitor and you want to put it in the middle, I think it's, don't quote me on this, but I think it's 210 degrees is done. In the interior. I don't bother because I know it's done. It's fine. But we gotta let that cool. You cannot cut into this right away, even though it smells really good. It's hot. You want to cut into it. I say at least an hour, but you should let it go a couple hours till it's cool. Also, there's that crackling noise, which is called the bread is singing. That's a really good thing. I don't know if you can hear it from there on that or not, but whatever. Anyway, yeah, so that's it. So thanks for watching, guys. If you like this, leave some comments. Let me know. I can maybe make better videos. It's my first time, so it may be a little rough, but you get the idea. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good night.